Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you here today with an article from The Federalist. This is dated January 20th. I don't know why there were air filter ads there. I've quite literally never looked at an air filter ad in my entire life. But anyway, this article is 7 reasons Biden was one of our worst presidents. Kind of a long one, so strap yourselves in and be thankful that at this point Trump is in office and we don't have to worry about Joe Biden, hopefully ever again. It says, as he leaves office, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. appears to have amassed a strong case that he deserves the title of worst American president. So it says, as Joe Biden prepares to leave office, it's worth reflecting on where he ranks among the 45 men who have served as president of the United States. By combining Carter-level incompetence on economic and foreign policy, radical leftism on social policy, and a singular disregard for the Constitution, Biden has perhaps earned the 45th and last place on the historical list. Biden presidency has had no widely recognized major accomplishments, at least none that have risen to the level of a historic achievement, while it has been marked by at least 7 major failings. Let's take these in reverse order. So number 7, scrolling up, we don't want to peek at the next one yet, do we? So as number 7, he leaves the world a far less secure and safe place. So few would say that the world seems a more peaceful or orderly place than it was when Biden's presidency began. To whatever extent, one ascribes blame to him for the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, he clearly bears responsibility for the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, perhaps America's most embarrassing foreign policy moment since the fall of Saigon. That debacle had a major and lasting effect on Americans' perceptions of Biden's competency. Prior to August 2021, when the Afghanistan withdrawal was completed, Biden's approval rating in Gallup's polling was always at least 50%. After August, it was never higher than 45%, and as of December, it sat at 39%. So number 6, he presided over the worst inflation in 4 decades and ran up the national debt, which is the reason we have the inflation. Over the past century, Jimmy Carter is the only president who presided over worse inflation during his first 3 years in office than Biden did. According to the latest figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, $100 when Biden took office is now worth just $82.88. Relatedly, Americans' credit card debt has risen 51% under Biden, that's through last September, to $1.166 trillion, the highest tally on record. What's more, the federal government racked up more deficit spending during just the first half of Biden's presidency than it did during the 4 years of World War II, even after adjusting for inflation. Inflation, did I say it with a P? Okay, so it says even after adjusting for inflation. With such massive quantities of borrowed money sloshing around in the economy, inflation predictably ensued, with everyday Americans paying higher prices for items ranging from groceries. A thrifty food plan costs 46% more now for the federal government than when Biden took office. That's a lot. To Big Macs, to airline tickets, to cars, to homes. Speaking of homes, 30-year mortgage interest rates rose from 2.8% to 7% under Biden's watch. Yeah, and I just use the grocery part for me because before Biden, when I would have like my list of groceries and I'd go, it would cost me between $80 and $100 every time. Even hitting 100 was like, whoa, what did I buy today? Now it's like I can't get it under 100, and it's usually like around 120. So just to say, but it's just, again, it's still, when it hits the higher amounts, it's like, well, what the hell did I buy that's so expensive? Anyway, number 5, he aggressively pushed an equity agenda that divides Americans. Equity, let's call it communism. So on his very first day in office, Biden issued an executive order on equity, asserting that America is a land of unbearable systemic racism, a claim unsupported by the evidence. Yes, I was about to say that there's literally no proof that that's actually a thing. They're just saying that it's there. Says Biden launched an ambitious whole-of-government equity agenda. This radical agenda informed Biden's entire presidency, from his refusal to enforce federal immigration laws, which are said to disadvantage non-citizen people of color and others who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality, to his rejection of the colorblind ideal in favor of race consciousness and favoritism, to his insistence that boys and men should be allowed to play girls and women's sports and use ladies' locker rooms, and that anyone who says otherwise is a bigot, whose views should be suppressed by the federal government and or its social media allies. This radical leftist social agenda, which defies both basic notions of equal treatment for all and basic recognition of biological truths, became a hallmark of Biden's presidency. Number 4, it says, he appointed judges who disregard the rule of law and rejected our nation's founding principles. Yeah, this is going to be a huge problem if these people stay in office. Like, they need, if there's a way to vote them out, like I know in some places you can actually, vote for the judges. I don't know if that's everywhere, though. They need to be voted out. says Biden has rejected the view that judges should construe the Constitution based on the original meaning of the actual text as understood by those who ratify the document and its amendments. Instead, he basically wants judges to read into the Constitution whatever they need in order to get out of it whatever they want. This promotes lawlessness and invites judges to usurp legislative powers. Beyond that, Biden has sometimes appointed judges who don't believe in America's founding ideals. Perhaps the most famous sentence in the English language reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." When Biden's sole Supreme Court appointee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was asked by Senator Ted Cruz during a confirmation process about these revered notions, which mark the core of American political creed, she replied, "I do not hold a position on whether individuals possess natural rights," which is a ridiculous thing to say. If there's any legal way to get her off the bench, that should probably happen. It says 3, he likely surpassed all previous presidents in abuse of the pardoning power. And at the end, it doesn't say, I'm looking here really quick, scanning it. Okay, I think he pardoned something over 8,000 people, which is way more than any other president, at least during the modern era. I don't know about before that, because I only saw it, I think, back to Nixon, but it was something just an utterly ridiculous amount more than the next highest person. So after frequently reassuring voters that he wouldn't pardon his dissolute son, Hunter, President Biden did just that shortly after the election. This rampant nepotism was self-serving both in a familial sense and in a more personal one, as further legal action against Hunter might have exposed more embarrassing or condemning information about the big guy. Biden then more or less closed down death row at the federal level, commuting the sentences of 37 of the 40 death row inmates. These commutations weren't based on mitigating circumstances in individual cases. Rather, Biden commuted the sentences of a whole class of federal convicts based on his own idiosyncratic view that the death penalty should apply only in cases of terrorism or a hate-motivated mass murder. In doing so, Biden narcissistically substituted his own views on the death penalty for the views of Congress and of hundreds of jurors who unanimously agreed, as the law requires, that the death penalty sentences in those cases were just, given the heinous nature of the crimes committed. In all, 96% of Biden's uses of the pardoning power came after the 2024 election, demonstrating his clear desire to skirt the will of the voters. So he decided he was going to be a tyrant, or a king, as opposed to a president, or a dictator, which is something, if you remember, in the debates in 2020, he said he was not going to do. Or he said it was bad for people to do or something. It was basically a point at Trump, and it's dude, look in the mirror. Anyway, number 2, he repeatedly usurped legislative powers by issuing kingly mandates. Well, here we go. I guess that was a good transition. Deep breath. The federal courts routinely had to rebuke Biden for issuing kingly mandates that usurped legislative power. Examples include his vaccine/mask decree at the expense of private workers, his transportation edict requiring Americans to wear masks on planes, trains, and buses, his proclamation that federal employees had to get one of the experimental COVID vaccines or else be fired, and his ploy, via executive fiat, to transfer some $400 billion in student loan debt from borrowers to taxpayers as a whole. And after being rebuked by the Supreme Court in the latter instance, Biden declared that didn't stop me, as he went around the verdict and transferred much of that student loan debt anyway. Yep, so glad my money's paying for some Harvard-educated, kid to have their loans paid off. And all the regular workers are doing it. So each of these monarchical decrees was struck down by the federal courts on the grounds that Biden exceeded his lawful authority. Not content merely with usurping legislative power, Biden also took it upon himself to try to rewrite the Constitution. On literally the last official federal workday of his presidency, the Friday before Inauguration Day, Biden, in opposition to a recent statement from Colleen Shogan, his own appointee as the Archivist of the United States, declared that the Equal Rights Amendment, a proposed amendment whose ratification window expired more than 40 years ago, somehow is now the law of the land and has become part of our Constitution per his decree. Too bad it's not a thing. You saw a lot of law experts, and I use that term in the loosest possible way, come out and be like, oh, he said it, so it's true. And it's wait, you guys are law professors. You should know how this works. And you're saying that this was totally a cool thing for him to do? It is the law. Hello, what? Number 1, Biden disregarded the core responsibility of the executive to take care of the laws that take care that the laws be faithfully executed in his unprecedented refusal to enforce immigration laws. As never was Biden's disrespect for the law of the land more apparent than in his unprecedented refusal to enforce federal immigration law. Prior to Biden, illegal aliens generally at least had to evade the authorities to get in the United States. Under Biden, they simply had to turn themselves in at the border and say the magic word, asylum. Then the Biden administration would usually let them into the U.S. in defiance of federal law, which requires that aliens be detained until their asylum claims can be processed. Team Biden alleged that there wasn't enough detention space, even while continually asking to have funding for detention space be cut further. In addition, border agents were so busy processing asylum claims that they couldn't effectively police the wide expanses of open border, so millions of illegal aliens crossed that way as well. The border crisis was a crisis by design. Yep, sure was. This was part of Biden's equity agenda, as his Department of Homeland Security indicated. Biden prioritized that agenda over his constitutional duty to enforce the law as written, which should have resulted in his impeachment and removal, but Republicans never came close to making the public case for such action, and Democrats refused to break ranks. As a result, roughly 10 million illegal aliens entered the U.S. on Biden's watch, more than enough to populate a new Los Angeles, San Diego, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Miami. It says America has had many presidents who were either largely ineffective or nearly irrelevant, but it's hard to think of any other chief executive who did as much harm, especially in the absence of corresponding benefit, as Biden. Barack Obama first put in motion, at least at the presidential level, the leftist project of fundamentally transforming the United States of America, but Biden recklessly hit the accelerator on that effort and lacked Obama's competence and even his moderation. Lyndon Johnson launched the Great Society programs that are now bankrupting us and was partially responsible for our failures in Vietnam, but Johnson didn't show as much outright disregard for the Constitution as Biden did, and he did sign into law the Voting Rights Act to help secure a long-neglected constitutional right. Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan may not have done much to avoid the Civil War or to prevent the spread of slavery into the territories, but Congress and the Supreme Court seemingly bear more responsibility for those failings. Carter was incompetent, but Biden was that and so much more. It's always hard to have adequate historical perspective as events are unfolding. Perhaps the Biden administration will age better than expected, but as he leaves office, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. appears to have amassed a strong case that he deserves the title of worst American president. And I'm going to go ahead and say that right now, that when things are reevaluated, maybe even in like a couple of decades from now, he probably will hold that title. You know, you're still going to have people on the left that are, you know, like the people doing those sorts of polls that are, no, he was actually really good. Like you see even on TV these days, people coming on and saying his presidency was great. And it was like, what are you paying attention to? Like, how can you say that with a straight face? But you're going to see people still do that. But I think for the most part, I agree with this, where it's just going to be like he's one of, if not the worst presidents that we've ever had. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Do you agree that Joe Biden is one of the worst presidents we've ever had? Let me know. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.